No. Most of the discussion that Christians have about fellowship is about with each other. There's almost no talk about fellowship with God. And in those 3 videos that I did, I was going through the technicalities of fellowship with God, but what I didn't say is that fellowship is really an intimate thing. The whole idea is to get to know God. What the cross really represents for Christ himself was total intimacy with Father in his own humanity. The only category of intimacy he didn't have by the time he got to the cross was the intimacy of knowing sin, because he had to stay sinless. And the only way to solve that intimacy problem was to be on the cross and to be imputed with everybody's sins. And that way, in his humanity, he had total intimacy with Father. Now, I spent a lot of time talking about this in my web pages. It took me some years to realize that this was actually the story. And it's been masked because Christianity typically mistakes how sins were actually paid for. And in Isaiah 53, it tells you it was through his thinking on the cross. And Christianity has routinely assigned everything as a body meaning, when it's only about thinking. Intimacy is a thinking with somebody else. You share their view. It's not about what you do together. It's about what you are together. And so Christ thought his way through the cross. The Holy Spirit empowered his humanity so he wouldn't cheat and use his own deity. And he thought his way through the cross. That's what Isaiah 53 says. And it was to get that intimacy, the total intimacy with Dad. Now, that's what fellowship means. Filling all in all. The end of last half of Ephesians, Ephesians 1:15 through 23. Filling all. In all things high and all things low. That's what fellowship is, the totality of it. Christ being the only one who went the whole distance. But for the rest of us, because of what he did, we can get a lot higher intimacy with him than Moses could have had, because he hadn't come yet, than Abraham could have had, because he hadn't come yet, than David had. Look at the Psalms if you want to know about intimacy. David had a lot of intimacy with God. That's why David was picked. It didn't, it's about how much do you want to know God. It's not about how good a person you are. First of all, you're no good, no matter how good you think you are. And the only one who can make you good is God. Alright? And he had to go to the cross to do that. And as far as your behavior in time, well, only God can make you good. And if you're talking about you making yourself good, well, then it isn't intimacy with God you want. It's ego. So you got to make a choice sometime in your spiritual life. Do you want fellowship with God, or do you want fellowship with your ritual or your ego or something else? And to the extent you want fellowship with God, baby, you'll get it. Okay? You'll get it in spades. And you'll get training as kingship. Because if you want to be intimate with God in eternity, this is the bad part for me anyway. This is my hickey in the spiritual life. If you want to be intimate with God, it means you have to become trained as a king. You have to learn how to be a ruler. I absolutely hate the idea of being a ruler. Hate it. There are issues. With me, this is the one. But with you, maybe the intimacy issues are different. But honey, if you want intimacy with God, you can get it. David got it. Abraham got it. Moses got it. That's why they're the heroes. Not because of any good works they did. God does the work. That's the theme of the Bible. You don't like it? Tough noogies. And most human beings and most Christians don't want intimacy with God. They don't want fellowship with God. So they don't learn and live on Bible. They just mouth it, to make them feel like they're, oh, I was a good girl, I learned a Bible verse today. That's not intimacy with God. Learning the Bible you need because it's His thought pattern. But it's got a goal. After you learn and live on Bible, while you're learning and living on Bible, you learn how your Lord thinks. And either that provokes in you a desire to know Him better or it doesn't. Bible analogizes it to sex. The Hebrew verb is davak, okay, and it also has a euphemistic word, yada, to know. And the Jews know all about that wordplay. They talk about it all the time. Intimacy with God. It isn't physical intimacy, it's right up here. That's what fellowship with God is about, and it's going to interfere with your fellowship with people. You eventually will lose contacts with people you know and people you love and people you don't love, because they're going to resent God having more importance in your life. You're going to end up maybe losing your family. You're going to have to make the choice, because the world wants intimacy with itself. People want intimacy with their works and their ego and their rituals and, their works and their works and their works. They don't want intimacy with God. They want goodies from God. You do for me, I do for you, God. That's all they want. It's like, marrying a guy for his money. People become Christian and they go to church, and really what they want is for God to give them things. They want to feel holy about themselves. That's why they go in for the ritual and the good deeds. Makes them feel good about themselves. And they want God to reward them for those good deeds. Okay, well, their good deeds stink. Isaiah 64:6. Do you want intimacy with God? Yes or no? That's what fellowship is about. And honey, let me tell you something. Once you start to have that intimacy, you're going to have problems like you never had before. And you'll never want to have intimacy with anybody else. Where do you think I never married? Okay? Now, maybe you are married. Okay, fine. You and your spouse can have an intimacy with God together. And once you do, you'll wonder, how anybody else could ever be married another way. Okay? It's knowing God intimately. That's what it's about. And you learn and live on Bible, and it seems like it's just all a lot of facts and figures, and you're such a good person because you learned a Bible verse, you learned Greek or Hebrew. Yeah, and you get past that. You grow past it until you start to realize it's about God Himself. And then you need the Greek and Hebrew so that you can start to see God Himself better. And once you do, you can't stand living anymore. Living Christ, dying prophet. That's Philippians 1:21. Just flew into my mind. That's life, baby. But it's knowing God. Not how good you are with the Greek and Hebrew. Not how many works you did. Not how, whatever the garbage is that people come up with. I mean, most people are Christian and they're, they wear it like a badge. They don't love God. They wouldn't know what love is, because love is intimacy, honey. They don't know. So that's what fellowship with God is all about. Okay? Intimacy with God. That's why those 3 videos, the prior videos, are important. It's fellowship with God versus salvation. Salvation gets you in the door so you can begin to have a relationship with God. Okay, but what kind of relationship do you want? Do you want it to be like a formal marriage? I do for you, you do for me. I only married this guy for his goodies. I do a good deed for God. Now God has to reward me. Is that what you want? That's what you'll get. Or do you really want to know God just for Himself? Totally. That's what Christ wanted to do. And He got it on the cross. That's what it was for. For Him personally. Between Him and Dad. That's what it was for. Or, do you want him to know him like that? Or do you just want to have nice, happy emotions about God all the time? And your dreams and your visions and all these feel-good things. Rah, rah, Jesus. Well, you can have that too. Christ didn't choose that, though. And he didn't choose the rituals. And he didn't choose the good deeds. Even though he's God. So it's your choice. But that's what fellowship with God is about. Progressive intimacy in knowing God for himself. And it's very problematic. There's a lot of tension. You feel like a dog all the time. But he's gorgeous. Ta-ta.